Hello, everyone. Uh, we've never done this before. Have you, Robert?
I've never done
I know
this.
you go live on
On
Facebook
Facebook
all the
all the
time.
time. That's right.
And we're just assume this is working. And welcome to our Facebook Live conversation with me, Eugene Izotov, and Robert Walters. And since you're watching this, you're probably related to the Oboe world, so you probably know who we are. Um, if not, look it up. But in short, I'm Principal Oboe with San Francisco Symphony, and I teach at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And Robert plays solo English horn in the Cleveland Orchestra, and he's professor of oboe and English horn at Oberlin College. Did I miss anything?
I think that's enough.
That's enough. And Robert is in Paris, right? And where are you, Robert?
All the mirrors here in Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Shaker Heights, Ohio. Very nice. Well, of course, we've been friends for so many years, and we unfortunately don't play together anymore like we once did in the Met, but occasionally we talk. So with the technology, we talk on Zoom
Yeah.
because it's a sort of a new thing. It's nice to see you, and
Yeah.
as opposed to the monochromatic phone sound. So anyway, we talk about a great number of things, and of course we have a long relationship, a professional relationship. We've exchanged students so many times, and we teach at each other's schools. We present guest master classes and such. It's always a great pleasure to see you. And you know, we have some things that sometimes we just sort of dive into the oboe thing, and then I guess it's too late because it's dinner time or it's like 1 in the morning. So there's some things that we generally have been talking about of late, maybe more often, more recently, more frequently rather than others. And of course, now we're all of us we're dealing with this very difficult situation. This pandemic has affected absolutely everyone in the world, and those of us in the performing arts world are greatly impacted by this, of course. And all of us are sitting at home, and we don't have the opportunity to perform. So this changed things for the moment quite a bit, and changed for us, the performers, the students. We don't get a chance to teach students directly in person. So Rob and I were talking about. Am I allowed to call you Rob in public in front of the whole
Only you.
world?
You're the
Only
only one.
me. Okay, Rob. So I'm gonna call you Rob just for the duration of this interview. And we were talking about how this whole period has affected our lives, and Zoom and teaching on Zoom, learning on Zoom. So, what are your thoughts about this, Rob?
You know, there are negatives, um, but I'm surprised at how much learning can occur and how actually fruitful it's been. When Oberlin went uh, online, I think in mid-March, second week of March, and
Yeah.
we'd already had three-quarters of the year under our belt in person. Um, and I was pretty apprehensive about, how are we going to make this work? How's it going to feel like actual lessons? And one
Yeah.
of the things with the Zoom technology that's turned out to be really, really beneficial is students uploading pre-recorded lessons. And there's something interesting about, and then we share it on the screen and we listen to it together in real time. And
Yeah.
I make my observations like, ooh, look what you did with this interval. Or you missed the center of the pitch here. Or I don't hear that phrasing. That's unclear. Or that piece of articulation sounds approximate. Let's go back and listen to it a couple of times, and then they really get it. And there's something about not being wrapped up in the act of producing it, where the student is actually free to notice it more, almost as if they're listening to somebody else, right? So you can sort of cast a cold ear on your own playing if it's pre-recorded and you're listening to it with a teacher. So I think that's very valuable. The other thing I've been doing, I had them pre-record and send in, and let's just take, depending on what year they were, let's take my juniors, which I'm generally doing Fairlings. So I'd say, okay, pre-record four Fairlings, major and minor, slow and fast, and submit it 24 hours before our lesson time, and submit your notes. I want you to evaluate what you hear. Tell me what is wrong, what's right. I want to see what you're noticing. And I'd sort of glance over their note. Okay, good. They hear that. They hear that. Ooh, they didn't hear that. This. So then, when we go through and listen to it together, then I, forget about their notes and I just focus on what I hear. And I get very exacting and very specific. And then they have a record of it. They have everything I've said about what they just recorded, and then they go back later and listen to it again, and notice and sort of practice off of it. So I mean, there's actually, I think there's a certain advantage to learning. Um, I've always tried to get people to record themselves and listen to themselves as part of their own learning. It's hard to get yourself to record yourself when you're a student. You don't want to because it sounds bad.
Well, a part of this whole Zoom thing, my first reaction, and it's still the reaction of a lot of people, is, geez, the underwater sound quality, because
It
everything
sounds like you're playing
sounds
in a
it
soup can
it
underwater.
sounds like you're sort of on a submarine that's tanking, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at times at least.
Well,
Oh,
that actually you
uh,
mentioned that, and that's a reason for I think uploading prior recording.
yeah,
'Cause when you're playing live, then you're subject to the whims of current internet connection. So that can be sped up or delayed. So, um, but I actually think so. The criticism about Zoom, and I think you're absolutely right. What it does, it distorts the oboe tone. And, you know, however, you are also liberated from getting overly obsessed about the quality of sound,
yeah,
and let's focus on the rhythm and the intonation. And I mean, there's so many things.
absolutely,
Music, it's an acoustical art. It
yeah.
has to sound a certain way. And when you can just evaluate, well, listen, what's happening with the sound? Does it really do what's on the page? The simple game is like, do I hear what I see on the page? That's the other thing. We have the music in front of us, so we're looking at it together as we're listening together in real time. There's something, sometimes in real life, students are overwhelmed with rehearsal schedule for orchestra, or maybe they're in opera, the hours are long, they're playing on someone's recital, and let's say they didn't have a lot of time to really practice that week. So they come in and they kind of wing it. It's not sight reading because no one does that for a lesson, but it's not really deeply prepared. And they kind of wait for the teacher to tell them what to do, and then they try to do that. But you can't do that with this platform and this way of learning. If you upload something before, you are responsible for that chunk of recorded material. And
It's a
so
performance. It's a recorded
it's a
performance.
recorded performance. So I have noticed that the students take more time and preparation to learn what they're going to play for the lesson. Because
Mm.
also there's a reckoning, right? There's a recorded example of what they actually can or cannot do.
Yeah,
You can go in and have a bad lesson. If it's not recorded, there's no evidence. You know. So I think that's been really interesting.
I came to the Zoom platform sort of by necessity, because I tried to resist it as much as possible because of the sound quality. And I've tried FaceTime, which actually works maybe better in some ways because it uses more bandwidth. But Zoom is a platform that allows more people to be included, and it's just sort of the industry standard right
Right.
now. And I think that you're completely right about the performance element of this, because lessons are, of course, it's a personal relationship, and you're such a warm human being, and sometimes that can sort of put the student at ease, maybe a little bit too much at the beginning of the lesson, and the person comes in, how are you, putting the oboe together and sharing sort of basic, it's all normal.
Right.
But then it's not a performance, because then, okay, and then the student has to make the switch to the actual performance in the lesson, and that's normal in a Zoom platform. There's just, in the recorded situation, there's no time for that. It's just the performance starts right away.
Yes.
So that's an advantage. And another thing that you and I talked about is uh, how you get ready for this lesson and what do you do in this very strange time of solitude when students have to, well, some festivals are still going on, like Tanglewood, like Music Academy of the West, they've gone online, several others, but some students have a chunk of time because they're not participating in summer programs. So, and those of us, professionals, we also are left without our colleagues and without a performance. So, what do we do during this moment of complete exclusion from our audiences and from each other? What do you think? It's a big
You're,
matzo ball.
now you're talking about as a performer, more, not as
Or a student, because I mean, listen, it's I have to say I find things to do, but it's hard to stay motivated. It's very difficult to stay motivated when we miss this dynamic of being a performer, both students and non-students. I mean, we musicians, we all miss each other. We miss the act of performing. So to practice for having a goal, having a task, something is in particular to look forward to, which we, thanks to the routine of the schedule, the patterns of our normal lives, we have, which is really amazing. It's constantly it makes us obsess about certain things, worried, stressed out, and we love it, and that's the profession. But we don't have that at the moment. So, in that sense, I mean, we're just like students or just like all musicians. So, how do you find, what do you think we can do to find the balance during
you
this
know,
really fragile
thing
time?
I've done. Initially, I think we had our last concert mid March, and I have to be completely truthful. I didn't open my case for a good 6 weeks. I just
Yeah,
I didn't play a note. A lot of people were out there making Zoom performances. You've done a huge body of work. Keep yourself engaged and perform beautiful stuff on YouTube. I didn't feel that urge. I felt just sort of I'm just gonna let myself off the hook for a while and seep in this. And what I ended up doing when I did come back to it, I thought, I'm just gonna play music I don't know. Like we all have like tons of solo music. I've got all these uh, Baroque trio sonatas. I found some CPE box stuff I didn't know I had. All the Handel stuff, but I also had some Platti. Um, I don't know. I've just been reading. I found some arrangements, all these Bach concertos for oboe, which And the other thing is, I've given the English horn a break because I gotta say, for an English horn, you sort of need an orchestra to back you up.
yeah,
For an English horn solo.
it helps.
So I've just been playing the oboe, and that has been pleasurable. I'm learning music. I'm just reading through stuff like I did when I was in high school, like I did when I was junior high, before I went off and got super serious with conservatory stuff. And growing up, and I just like learn pieces all the time.
Yeah,
So I'm enjoying that, and I'm not to keep to keep motivated without a deadline. I guess that's hard right now. But
yeah,
what I'm trying to do, I guess, is just keep curious, and it's been fun for me to do that. And the other thing I was thinking, one student mentioned to me recently during the Colorado College Festival, online virtual festival last few weeks. Student at Rice University, she said, actually, I found that my reed making has gotten better over the last couple of months because without the pressure of needing to get through a rehearsal or a concert or sound good in a quintet rehearsal, I have the courage to actually take reeds farther and finish them. And if I ruin them, it doesn't matter. I'll just make another one. And so she's luxuriating in the, without the constant need for reeds for public performance. She feels like she's being able to learn more about reeds. And that's I think one of the things that's hardest about Zoom is reed making. Teaching reed making doesn't work so well in this platform, obviously. And but strangely enough, I noticed with my students in Oberlin in the last 2 months of the semester, I just said, okay, look, here's what we're doing with reeds. The training wheels are coming off. and you got to learn to ride the bike yourself because I'm not going to be scraping your reeds. You can show it to me kind of, but I'm not going to. So look, you have to for a Zoom lesson, you've got to have a reed that responds and reed that is in tune. Both of those things have to be there to play the oboe, to get the oboe to function, right? So, and in a way, back to your, everyone's original comments about Zoom is the sound quality is bad, right?
Yeah,
So
can be.
we accept that reality, and there's something liberating about that for oboe players who can be overly obsessed with tone, the color, oh my God, my sound, my sound, my sound. Okay, that's an important aspect of playing, but it's the medium, it's not the message, and you gotta. The music has to speak, so you can tell. You might not be able to tell exactly the right. I actually, as an experiment, I had a student play for me. Okay, play 3 or 4 reads for me, just different reads. I want to hear what I can, if I can notice a big difference.
Yeah,
Frankly, I couldn't. They all sound the same. I'm sure that if we were in the room together, I would notice a difference in those 2 reads. I'm sure that if I tried them, I would notice them.
yeah,
But what it comes down to is when you play the music, is the response right? Because you can tell if someone's missing an attack. You can tell if the note phases out before the end of the phrase. And convert, especially with oboe, the upper octaves, if the second octave notes A, B flat, B natural, and C, if those are not placed with good pitch in the reed, I mean that's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to fake your way through a slow fairling if the reed is not functioning well,
yeah,
right? So I think the emphasis of the reed being a tool for the music to speak well on your instrument. Primarily, you get that part right. You have to get it right. Um, I think there's been something liberating. I got to say, I never had a single student complain about their read for 2 months on Zoom with all the lessons. They made a read. They recorded their lesson. We talked about the music. You can say, "Ooh, this read is flat." I can tell that, because you're kind of pushing it up. It's a flarp. Now it sounds flat and sharp at the same time. So that read this week is not stable. Make a stable read for next week. That's the extent of my read talk. As I could tell that what you were playing on was getting in the way of the music in a certain way. And then someone would fix it. And we go, ooh, okay. And not only that, this week, the slow fairling is so in tune and it's right in the pocket. Keep this one, right? Lesson number 4 of post spring break COVID on Zoom. That's an example of a perfect fairling read. The intonation, the notes are living right where they need to. So go back and listen to the week before when it was all over the place and just simply notice the difference, right?
yeah. I think that that's very true. And the word that you used was liberating. That's a very important thing about this particular situation, and maybe in general, because of course we completely depend on reads for so many things. We know this, and we spend so much time doing it. But not just on Zoom. On Zoom, you pretty much can tell the sound quality. It's basically in a ballpark or not.
Mm-hmm.
But um, when you're listening, you can always tell certain things, read or not, intonation. You can tell.
Yeah,
Also, you can tell some things about music, like some basic things of music making, like good rhythm. You can tell. You need good read for good rhythm,
yeah,
and several other very basic things. And I think that being in this predicament with Zoom, we sort of have to, we can pay more attention to the things that are actually much more understood by everyone, not just oboe players.
right.
And I don't know if absolutely everyone who's listening to this have had this happen to them. I know we have. You sometimes have 2 reads and you're on the verge, like you're about to go on stage and you have to make the horrible decision which one to use,
Right.
because this one is a little bit brighter, but more action. This one is a little bit darker, more this, and then you catch like a valued colleague and say, hey, can I play this for you? And you play the 2 reads, and they're like, I don't know, it sounds like you, and you kind
Yeah,
of hate him for the sentence, like, gee, thanks a lot, that's really
yeah, yeah.
helpful,
Right.
get out of here. But
Yeah.
but I mean, really, yes, there's a difference in tone qualities, and we are after perfection and so forth. But we need to have some things that oftentimes we forget about as we consecrate our life to the search of the perfect reed.
Right.
And I think, well, that's perhaps one of the next subjects that we can talk about. But it absolutely should not, cannot, must not come at the expense of everything else in music.
Right. You know, it reminds me of what's a comment that Chuck Ullery once made, the longtime principal bassoonist of St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. I was at a festival with him and chamber music in Columbia a few years ago. And remember, he referred to his instrument as a reed tester, jokingly. And I think oboists often get sort of caught in that, right? And that's gone out the window right now, right? You just want to read that work so you can play your instrument well.
Yeah.
And it kind
And
of,
focus on music.
and focus on the music and focus
So
on
we
the
can
readings.
maybe, so while equipment is important and readism is important,
Yeah.
we can pretend that maybe we're
Yeah.
actually musicians who
Exactly.
play oboe, English horn, and not reed scrapers or
That's right.
clip clippers or gougists. What do you
Yeah,
think about that
exactly.
radical idea?
Gougists. I love that
Not
word.
to dismiss this at all. By the way, we have a question
Yeah.
from
Okay.
Elizabeth Starr from the Philadelphia Orchestra,
Yes.
and she's saying, Robert, how are you having students record their lessons? Is that a video recording?
Oh, actually, yes. I like the video recording better. Um, I think you can notice more somehow. I mean, we've tried both. Sometimes students have sent in just audio, and of course you
Yeah.
can just start. But I had a student notice, my left shoulder is like it's doing this interpretive dance all the time. I didn't even know that, And I said, yeah. So why don't you record it again for next week? And like let's. And I said, let's try an experiment. Let's have your right shoulder go wild, just so you can feel like you have a choice. And then the following weeks, both of her shoulders were relaxed. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because when we play, or our perspective, our perception of everything that we're doing
Yeah,
is about 1 meter, 1.5 meter for English horn. It's the
yeah,
distance between the maximum, the bell, and your
right.
ears. That's
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
that's going on in our head.
yeah,
That's the perception. But I say to my students that even if they're playing for just me in the room, I am probably 4 or 5 times that distance, and it's just me.
yeah,
So playing for me is already you have to take that into an account that that's 5 times the distance. And if you play for an actual audience in an orchestra, that's anywhere from 20, 50, 100 times that distance. So what goes on in your head is not it's far from what actually comes out of the instrument, which can serve us very well sometimes.
yeah.
And I think on uh, these video recordings that you're doing, um, we can't see ourselves or hear ourselves while we're playing. I mean,
Right.
it's impossible.
Yeah,
So it's not a completely accurate representation for tone quality. We know this.
yeah,
We absolutely get this.
yeah,
But it does give us a very valuable perspective, uh, having just, especially when you right after you record and then
yeah,
you listen to it yourself. That's
yeah.
that's an immediate reaction. It's an immediate combination of how you felt about something and how actually it was or it
Right.
looked. Yeah, that's a very good way
Also,
of doing it.
to Elizabeth's question, you can make a lot of really good progress on a person's embouchure with a video recording, right? Like I had a student who, she bit, she had flat reeds and she bite. I'm like, look at that, look at your. This is all crunchy like an orange peel. Like, now look, when I play, it's like circular. This is flat. There's some support. Like you can make a lot of progress with a person's embouchure when they're not playing and they're looking at it and like, I look like that, right? And also just the sort of the physicality of what we do. I think the best players on any instrument look physically relaxed and look in some kind of balance and don't contort themselves in strange ways when they play. So I think that's also valuable.
Yeah.
Uh, so, do we have any other questions
Um,
flying in, or I'll ask you a question.
if I go to this page, I look at the
Yeah.
people. I hear you twice
Yeah,
with a
people
delay.
self.
I've got two Roberts. It's very nice, actually. Um, Wait a minute. Uh, Not at the moment. A lot of people are commenting on how we can make the Zoom quality, audio quality better.
Oh,
So,
actually, Eugene, why don't you talk about that? Because you just some settings on Zoom that you do right in the preferences that make teaching sound better. What are those things that you came up
there
with?
are some basic things that have universally been efficient because Zoom, I am yet to verify this with an actual, tech person.
Yeah.
But it seems that first of all, if you're on a desktop platform, you have more options for tone control, sound control than you are on mobile devices, I'm sorry to say. So
Uh-huh.
I cannot find these options on my iPhone or iPad. But when you're using the desktop version,
Yeah.
you can go to preferences and you can go to control audio settings. And there's an option called original sound. That original sound has to be on. In other words, if you go to the advanced settings, when you click that box, enable original sound, that seems to increase the sound quality.
Uh-huh.
Actually, it's a little bit silly because I don't know why Zoom made the interface, but when you make that option available, in top left corner, the option turn off original sound and turn on original sound, which to me is a little bit confusing. When it says turn off or original sound, it means it's on. So
Right.
it
Yeah.
should say turn off, which is a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
backwards. I hope they'll just make a simple switch next time.
Yeah.
If Zoom people, if you're listening,
Yeah.
Robert and I want the simple button. Thank
Right.
you. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a lot you can do as far as that. But I know now if we're going to get into the conversation about purchasing expensive gear, I mean, I make a lot of online recordings on my social media, YouTube channel, etc. So I actually have a very nice audio setup.
Uh-huh.
But unfortunately, because programs like Zoom do sound compression, video and especially sound compression, you're only going to be as good as the sound compression on this platform that you're running, which is Zoom. So
Yeah.
I think that most people find it useful to use a USB microphone instead of just a built-in mic in your computer.
Uh-huh.
USB mics are relatively inexpensive. They can go as cheap as like $40, $50. You can get a reasonably good one. Make sure it's stereo.
Yes, some students of mine have gotten a snowball. Do you know those mics?
I don't know the snowball,
Yeah.
but I hate the name. That's just
Yeah.
awful.
Anyway, it's like 40 or 50 bucks. It did make a real difference in
I
the
have a
audio.
I don't use as USB microphones for my actual studio recordings, but I have a USB mics that I use for Zoom and
Uh-huh.
other projects because it's very easy because you just basically plug it in. And
Yeah.
I just want to say that although I've participated in a number of recordings that have won Grammys, I never actually went to the ceremony and said, "Oh, I would like to thank the Academy," and
Yeah.
but this is as close as I get.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, this is called the Blue Yeti microphone. I would like to thank the Academy,
Yeah, yeah.
and this is
Oh, that looks legit. That looks very legit.
yeah, thank you. But that's unfortunately expensive. It doesn't have to be Blue Yeti. I think that people, I mean, there's so many mics that just a simple USB microphone that plugs in directly into your computer, it will
Yeah.
do a much better job than well this. I'm wearing this because it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
easy, but um, it's certainly better than the kind of setup where your desktop has a built-in microphone. Then your desktop is the fan goes off, the heating fan, and then you're
Yeah.
it sounds like you're in mission control somewhere, you know.
I was thinking about our prior conversation and teaching and learning on Zoom and what that's like, the pandemic and lack of performances. There's one thing I want to say that has nothing to do with technology, but it's sort of an existential truth which everyone will realize.
Yeah,
Um, and in any time, in order to become really proficient at a high level of one's art, whatever instrument they play, um, there's no substitute for going into a room alone and shutting the door to practice. That has to happen.
yeah,
And there's something about this pandemic that has made everyone go into a room and shut the door. And we don't have live performances. We aren't playing ensembles, for audiences, that feels very strange.
Yeah,
But the one most essential truth about getting better and playing at a higher level, which is just time alone with the instrument and music and how you relate to each by yourself in a room with the door shut, that's a huge advantage to this moment. I feel like I really, and again, like you use that word motivated. It is hard to stay motivated without external performances, without deadlines and all that. But I think staying curious and there is a motivation in that. And also the freedom from being, on a sort of grind or performance schedule. I mean, I think you can figure out basic stuff between you and your instrument, you and the music, in a way that is deeply advantageous and will last long after this.
I agree completely. I think that while we're stuck at home, as you put it, and this goes back to talking about reeds and practicing. So, yes, this is actually what we do. We practice. We
Yeah,
shut the door and we have time to ourselves to better ourselves and to really examine everything that needs to be better or different.
yeah,
So, the not having a schedule, the not having a timeline, like an audition or a particular challenging performance or this or that, and just
yeah,
everyday's life thing that gets in the way,
right.
that's actually a rare luxury.
Yeah,
That's very unusual, and I can't remember the last time I could actually just go to the studio and actually practice.
right.
Now, it's true that I pushed myself very hard to come up with more projects. We're still doing things with the symphony. I'm sure you are. I mean, we have to keep the music going. But
Yeah,
of course, it doesn't compare to the actual symphonic schedule where we
yeah,
have to live on the time clock of our orchestras and conservatories. So this is a really rare time to do this. And the advantage of this, particularly with reeds, for example, because when I was a student and I would take lessons with all these marvelous players, and I would go to summer festival and I would ask them questions about reeds, and they always had some kind of an answer. Excuse me, good answer.
yeah,
Always had the right answer. Like
right.
why this is why. And I remember having this thought, gee, when I become, if I become, one of them, when I grow up, essentially, it'll be so nice because I will have all the answers. I will never make a bad read. I'll just never have a bad read day ever again, like these guys.
Yeah,
And well, it's been a few years since then. Um, and I don't know if bad read days qualifies, but the thing is, we always want more. I want more. I want better. We want better
yeah,
because it's not, and what about it we want better changes based on where you are on your journey as a musician, what you want out of sound, out of response, out of stability, out of longevity, etc. So, in order to decide how to do this, well, it's sort of you have to try things. So, I was thinking several years ago, I had this interesting thought in the middle of the night. My mother is a molecular biologist.
hmm,
She's a brilliant scientist. I clearly did not inherit that that part of the gene. I'm a musician like my dad and uncle. But her title is research scientist. That's her official job description. What do you do? I'm a research scientist. And
hmm.
it occurred to me that the word research basically is a nicer word instead of the word failure. Because overwhelming part of what she does fails.
Right.
She's trying to find the vaccine. She's trying to find these enzymes that help with the cancer treatment. They do the experiment, fails. Do something else, fails.
Right.
Fails, fails, fails.
Right.
Then they find it.
Yeah.
And I think it would be horribly depressing to be called a failure scientist. That doesn't sound good at all.
Right.
But I think so. So failure is just it's a normal part
Yeah.
of her search
Yeah.
of and I find that we all have individual relationship with the gods of Cain.
Yeah.
Sometimes they love us, sometimes not so much, but we all learn somehow. And I think that trial and error, trying things that you haven't tried before, maybe is a really valuable experience. But you can't do this when you have to deliver results, or at
Right.
least not as bravely. You can't just say, you know what, to hell with this. I'm just going to try something completely different, and I don't care what they say. Well, I care because I mean, we have to sound good. So now we have this chunk of time when we're in our practice room, and this I was talking about reeds, but this
Yeah.
goes absolutely for playing,
Yeah.
because we um, I love the expression, we are students for life.
Yeah.
I heard it first from Daniel Matsukawa
Yeah.
and in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and that really stuck with me, because being a student for life, maybe to some people it sounds like some sort of inadequacy, like you know, but it's absolutely the right way of looking at what we do. We have to grow and we have to improve. And being a student for life, well, we have the opportunity to be students, not quite literally, in our practice room, in our studio, with our reeds, with ourselves, with our music, with our thoughts.
Right.
So it's a
Actually,
rare, strange luxury of this time.
and I would say for students who are missing guidance with reads from teachers, like, on hand, three-dimensional um, sharing of reads and knives. Okay, yeah, I miss it too. But the reads themselves are the best teachers. I mean, you just make a lot of reads and you notice how they behave and you
Yeah,
notice what you do. And, even when all conditions are right, you're not going to get a great read every time. But I've kind of noticed that, like, you do certain things, there's a negative certainty in read making. If you do certain things wrong, you'll get the same wrong result every time.
yeah, yeah.
And you can notice that. And, it's just that statement of not needing them, having more courage to finish them, and just notice how they behave. That is a luxury. And
Actually,
also the
um,
failure. It's interesting, just your word failure. There is a lot of failure inherent in the process of read making. I mean, it's just built in. And so getting comfortable with that, as you get comfortable with uncertainty in all forms, is a useful skill. And I think you can notice that more with less pressure. And the other thing, I was thinking about, like, baseball. The best hitters in baseball, the legends, strike out most of the time.
first of all, you're talking to a Russian. I know nothing about baseball, but
Yeah,
I agree with the metaphor.
yeah,
We have a. I just want to share a comment from Tom Boyd, who
yeah,
said, "Practice in a dead closet, you'll hear imperfection."
yeah,
I love that. I actually, you know what I used to do? I still do it sometimes. I come up to the actual wall, like if I want to see what I really, really sound like.
yeah.
Not even the room sound, nothing.
Right,
I'm up to the wall or actual closet with, know, with the clothes hanging, and just
yeah,
play into this, because what I'm hearing is just completely true sound, not room
right,
sound, nothing, just me.
yeah, right,
And it could be quite a shocker sometimes,
right.
just in what you hear. Well, I noticed that we're talking about the subject. We're easing into the subject called oboe tone.
Oh, and that's a Eugene Izotov subject, isn't
Is
it?
it really?
I think it
Because
is.
I thought you came with a PowerPoint presentation, being one or two chairs away from the oboe sometimes.
Well,
Is
actually,
your
that's funny because
perspective?
I have had the best seat in the house in the profession, I must say. Like, in my 4 years at the Met, I sat next to the last four principal oboists of the Met. Sit next to the last four principals in Cleveland. I sit next to Woodham's in his prime. I mean, I've had a very good seat
I'll say.
for this art form. And, knowing you as long as I have, and how you sounded when you first got to the Met um, from San Francisco, and I remember you playing recordings of yourself as a teenager in Moscow, and I remember, the tone that you had at that, if I can use that term. Um,
Yeah.
um, and what I think is fascinating about you, coming from Russia, when you did actually studying with Ralph Gomberg, who didn't help you a lot with reeds and tones specifically, right? That wasn't his focus. And yet, to my ear, you've created for yourself the most American of American tones. I mean, it really is. It's an intentionally dark, round, velvet, contained, full, and you did that on purpose. And I would like to ask you about your conception of oboe tone in an American way, and how you went about creating that for yourself in the way you did over the course of your career.
Well, first of all, thank you, Robert, for this really flattering description of my tone. As you know, my tone has during how many years I've known you? 20-ish?
18, yeah.
18 years.
Yeah.
So during these 18 years, my tone has gone through a lot of transformations, which
Yeah.
are all a reflection of where I was, my strengths and weaknesses with reed making,
Uh-huh.
my musical environments, the halls where I played, and perhaps even more importantly, the people who influenced me, reed makers, players, oboes, and non-oboes. So it's a complicated soup of
Uh-huh.
things. Um, so to start from now, which is a time when I was thinking because speaking about tone is just have you noticed how ultimately impossible it is to actually describe a certain quality that you want? I mean, bright, dark, all of those are relative,
Yeah.
descriptions.
Sure.
So the best way that I can describe conceptually what a good tone is, what I look for in something that I call good tone on oboe and perhaps on many other instruments, is good tone needs to have basically two things. It needs to have this, which people call projection,
Uh-huh.
color, intensity, vibration, resonance, etc. And it needs to have this, which people call dark, round, heft, broad, something to blow against, etc.
Yeah.
All of those adjectives.
Uh-huh.
And what's really important is that this is based on vibration and this is based on resistance.
Hmm.
When I figured that out, that I really need both of these things,
Mm-hmm.
that's when things started uh, happening for me. And because I realized in college, I switched to lob and oboes. I had a wonderful lob and oboe, which is it's sort of like English horn light. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very very hefty, right?
Yeah.
Has a lot to blow against. It's a copy, as I understood, of the B series Loray, the Holy Grail, and
Yeah.
it's very very much a lot to blow against. And when I got this wonderful instrument from Ralph Gomberg, who gave me that instrument, it was one of his instruments. I immediately started to sound better. I would just practice, and I would say to myself, you know what? I sound better. I sound dark, and I sound full, and this is good. I was doing this, like this happened after the Russian, and also, a Russian wind playing is light years ahead of what it was, when I was there in early 17th century. But and then I started to play in the orchestra, and the number one comment that everyone gave me, every conductor and everybody else, more oboe, more oboe, more. Can't hear you. Play out more. And I am a reasonably healthy guy, and I'm in control of my faculties, and I would just literally blow my brains out, and I realized that I cannot possibly generate more air, more wind
Yeah.
to play, and yet it's not loud enough. So because I realized that I was missing this
Uh-huh.
pretty much completely. I was going for this,
Yeah.
and if you put a microphone right in front of the, if you put the microphone in front of the bell, then that's fine. And that's when Gomberg was a great storyteller. He talked about Tabitha all the time. Wonderful. Uh, just it was kind of like I met the guy. I mean, I wish,
Yeah.
but it was just like, and he talked about Tabitha's cooking and wine. It was just like it was all this
Ah.
complicated, complete picture of like a complete life, joy in life, not just oboe playing, but life in general. It was fabulous. And he said, um, "Listen, the first time for me, from his experience, the first time heard the concept of squillo, like singers have squillo. It's just like the quality that that a voice, every a beautiful voice must have. Unless you have this squillo, this ring, this it sounds terrible in English, squeal, but it comes
Yeah.
from the same word, squillo. It's just the resonance. Your voice doesn't carry this. is what carries. This is what
Uh-huh.
carries everything that you're doing. And he talked in so many metaphors that were so beautiful. Another metaphor was that we on the oboe, we should play like fireworks. Fireworks are not for here, because if it's for here, it just, it
Right.
destroys everything. You're supposed to cut through the orchestra, the stage, and become this beautiful bouquet of colors out there in the hall.
Yeah.
So for that, you need this. And that's around the time when I finally started to hear this, started to realize this really is when you met me.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we played um, Electra. That was my first
Right.
show at the Met. And I remember this. It's not a huge oboe part, but it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Mamma mia! All those low D's at the end.
Yeah.
Your eyes are hurting because you're counting, and of course, the Met Orchestra can, maybe play it. I mean, so fabulous. They really know this stuff. I only play one opera, so I was counting and this and that, and I had to also figure out how to make a reed that would last an opera, not like
And then the
Tchaikovsky
short
violin
opera,
concerto.
by the way.
It was what?
And
And
that's
as
a
a short,
yeah.
I mean, short opera in Met languages is an hour and 35 minutes. That really is a short opera.
Yeah.
So I mean, not for me at the age
Yeah.
of 28. And I remember when I worked so hard and I played this low solo. It's just low D starts a low D, da 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 da. And you said to me afterwards that you sound just like you studied with Woodhams. And of course, I never studied with Woodhams. I studied with his recordings. I met him, of course, later many times. But I heard the sound, and that was a really huge compliment because to me, he really embodies this beautiful center that's always there, and it's a beautiful combination that has both this and that. And that was kind of when my journey really began because I was able to find a balance between these two things for the first time in my life in the Met. And also being near the singers, of course, who, not all the singers, some of the singers just have very good managers. But sometimes, remember if you hear like, Renee Pape singing or something, or like Susan Graham and so many others, I remember being there and thinking, I mean, first of all, it's incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I remember feeling another feeling. I remember feeling just envy.
Yeah.
I remember feeling, well, I want to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And of course, the Met Orchestra has left a profoundly huge impact on me, on you, and on anybody else who's there or who used to play there, doesn't play there anymore. So many wind players have come from there. I think that we all were influenced by another concept that's very, very important to me called legato.
Yeah.
And when you played with Chicago, did you meet Dale Clevenger? You know who that is?
Oh, sure. Of course.
So everybody knows. I mean, we musicians know the term legato, but you don't know the term legato with a Tennessee accent, which is
Yeah.
legato. And Dale Clevenger is really big on legato.
Yeah.
And when I came to Chicago, he talked to me about legato, and he pointed out how important it was, of course, and he also pointed out that I had it. And the reason I had it is because of my time in the Met, because you just simply cannot play the way they play with this wonderful, flowery, lush sound, but also with the ability to sustain a musical line on any instrument. You can't play without that. And they're so unique because you have to do this because it's opera, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what the best voices do. So that was a hugely important thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you, I will say.
Eugene, it reminds me of what your reads felt like when you first got to the Met. For me, we spent 2 years chained to the reed desk together, and I watched your reads change dramatically in a very short amount of time on purpose because I remember when you first got there, your reads were very light, very vibrant, had a lot of ease
Yeah,
and a lot of fluidity and not a lot of pitch upstairs.
yeah.
And I remember saying to you, okay, this is great. It feels good, but it's pretty flat. And you
Flat
saying
and
to me,
unstable.
yeah, unstable. And you saying to me, and this is in preseason before the season begins, you saying, well, that's okay. I can just
I
kind of
can
leave
do
it
it.
I can just kind of lip it up.
I can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember after the first performance of Bohème, which is what, 3 hours and change, and he looked at me and says, I can't hold a reed up for this long
Not a
in one
chance.
night. Right.
By the way, I just want to share, since both of us are Met graduates, I
Yeah.
just want to say to our friends who are joining us, I mean, really, you remember those doubles on Saturdays?
Yeah. Yeah.
So um, we don't always play two operas on Saturdays, but the fact that the Met Orchestra
It could
can
happen.
play two operas with
Yeah.
all the qualities that we described,
Yeah.
and an opera in the afternoon is, well, you're lucky if it's a bohème because it's only 3 hours. It can
Yeah.
be more. It can be 4 or 5 hours. And the opera at night can also be 3 or 4 or 5 hours, right? Maybe
Yeah.
not 5 hours. But I mean, so if you're in that situation, oboistically speaking, yes, I was a rock star. I thought I could play on flat, unstable reeds
Yeah.
for the duration of the Tchaikovsky violin concerto,
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
right? As a young associate. Well,
Yeah.
you can't do this in
The,
and also, you can't do this in an orchestra that plays with lush, round, beautiful sound like the Met Orchestra. And
yeah.
you also, or you can, bring 15 reeds maybe, that do this. Because when you play on flat, unstable reeds, you
Yeah.
have to bite on them, which I did.
Yeah.
And then, well, first of all, biting is not fun.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good quote.
It's
That's
not fun.
that's
Thank
the
you. This is
takeaway quote from the day.
my best work right here. It's not fun. And
Yeah.
also, it kills the reed.
Yeah.
And
You're at
Dahmer,
cross purposes with yourself. I always tell students biting a reed, it's like talking like this, where you want the hand around your throat all day to keep your voice going.
that's when you met me. I was doing exactly
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's also around the time I discovered the concept that transformed my reed making completely, called pitch stability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Having to make stable reeds, not good reeds, whatever that means, but reeds that have a tone and a center of pitch, stable pitch built into them,
Especially in the high register, right? I mean,
especially in the high
yeah,
register.
yeah.
And I love when you came and did a class here last year. A student was playing something, and you used the phrase. I use this with all the respect that I have for my friends in the Luray company. But you said just because the Luray company gives you a certain kind of A, or I can't remember which note this was, doesn't mean it should be a certain kind of pitch or whatever.
Uh,
I mean, oboes have tendencies, Luray, Marigold,
right.
whatever. I mean, oboes
Yeah. Yeah.
instruments have tendencies.
Yeah. I think what I said was don't let the factory phrase for you,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
So
Don't let the
if one
factory.
note sits where it sits, I mean, I think that's one reason why people spend so much time with technicians just to get the scale to line up, right? Just
Yeah.
to get everything. And, but I remember back to that, your initial transformation is like, I've got to get a high register. That's what you said to me. You said, I've got to get a high register. And then your reeds got more and more stable. The upstairs, the pitch placement of the octaves, you started to build that into your reads, which I have to say it was very interesting because I'm like, yes, because look, the two uh, Elaine Duvaz, John Furlow, I mean, their pitch
Pitch
placement,
floor.
just the stability that was so huge for both of them,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because when you came to the Met, it wasn't an issue
It was
in,
not an issue.
and then it became an issue for you, right?
Yeah.
So
It
I
was
mean,
not an issue.
exactly. So
But it was very quickly an issue. It was quickly an issue because of
yeah.
actual survival,
Mhm.
because you don't want to be biting for 6 hours. It's
Yeah,
awful.
they call that the adaptation of species, right?
Adaptation of species, but that's just like survival.
Yeah,
But the other, because I really wanted to have a multi-layered, complex, broad, better sound that I have
yeah,
that
yeah.
would serve a broader variety of music.
Right, right.
We have a question of Elizabeth Starr again. She's asking Eugene and Robert, what oboe shaper tips do you use and recommend to students?
Ah.
Don't you have your own? Did you make one?
I, I like my English horn shape. Yeah. I have to say, that depends on the gouge, right? I mean, I think it's the marriage of the shape to the gouge. But basically, I want a shape that people don't have to bite for a high register.
No.
And, depending on the gouge, that can be a wider shape or not. Um, but to me, that whole thing that we started talking about is, sometimes I quip that the oboe, it's a wind instrument, it's not a face instrument, right?
No. Very
So
good.
to me, whatever the shape you're after has to be something that allows you to just blow and make the sound with actual air moving and not muscling it up. Think about like intonation on a string instrument. You place your finger on the fingerboard in a certain area and you get the intonation, you get the pitch there. But
Yeah.
you don't have to squeeze that fingerboard to keep the pitch up. You just go there.
No.
So I think, I'm
So
going to,
brand plugin right now. Let's go. What do you recommend? Let's say I come to Oberlin.
yeah. See,
I need a better shaper tip. What do you recommend?
I'll say something kind of middle of the road. I just say Mac plus plus, Mac Pfeiffer, something not too narrow, not too wide.
Okay. So,
But
yep. Go on.
but I'll say that's a starting point.
Yeah.
I
It
don't.
has it has to work with the gouge, as you
Yeah,
said.
exactly.
That's very important.
No, and
To
like, look.
paraphrase
Yeah,
your phrasing about the air is cheap. My way of saying the same sentence is air is cheap and mouth is expensive. That's the same
yeah,
sort
right.
of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't mind working more here.
Right.
I don't want to work here. So I would recommend easily Gilbert One, but that means unfortunately absolutely nothing because my Gilbert One is not respectfully the Gilbert One that is out there today. It's just different. And I've tried
Right.
John Furlow's shaper tip. It's different. It's just
Yeah.
that's what he uses apparently. And I see my dear friend Laura, my dear Laura from Chicago Symphony is here. She says yes. She agrees with everything. No, I missed the previous part, but she's using Joshua plus plus, and that's a wonderful shaper tip that I've used for many years as well.
Uh-huh.
You have to tie it differently, and also, when people talk about the right shaper tip, you really have to figure out the right tying length. I know it's extremely mundane and boring to talk about it
Yeah.
because that's very far away from the making music.
Right.
But if you make the decision that it is important to you to play on stable reeds that are up,
Yes.
then you have to have pitch floor, and you cannot have that without the right configuration of the length and the tying length of the shaper tip. So she, as far as I know, she ties Joshua plus plus about 71 and a half.
Uh-huh.
I may be off a little bit, but I mean it's shorter than most shaper tips are tied. But it works absolutely great for her, and
Yeah.
I miss her every day. She's fabulous. You're fabulous, Laura. So anyway, but we're talking about we covered some big matzo balls, but the one thing she's correcting me. It's just plus, not plus plus. Thank you, Laura. Joshua plus. Okay, so that's the shape that I use. I thought it has two dots on it. Am I just, or maybe it's just a plus sign that after wear and tear it looks like two dots. So the one thing that we often talk about is perhaps in one way is not as relevant right now because everything is on hold. I'm of course talking about auditions,
Mm-hmm.
but auditions are never on hold
Hmm.
because that's what we musicians do. We have to play and win an audition in order to join a wonderful orchestra. So we've served on audition committees together. We've mentored students who've gotten some decent jobs lately.
Hmm.
And it's been a wonderful journey. It's been a privilege. And it's also kind of like a unique animal every single time an audition happens.
Yeah.
And so Robert is prepared to make a statement how to win all the auditions in 10 words or less. Go.
Oh, I am.
Well, so because it's a common question from students, inevitably,
Yeah.
some in festivals. And so, because a lot of times students just don't understand how it is done, and it can get pretty
Yeah.
discouraging
Well,
because auditions are very brutal. So, what are your thoughts?
it's a strange process. And just the act of an audition itself, I'm pretty certain that there's no one listening out there at the moment who plays the oboe because they heard someone play an unaccompanied orchestral excerpt by themselves when they were young, right?
No.
You hear it because you play because you hear an orchestra concert. You hear recordings. You hear, so the act of playing, and extracting a line from an entire score and hearing just that line by itself from a single line player. I mean, it's an artificial experience,
Yeah.
and I think it's one that can be pretty profoundly alienating for most people. Um, I know I did very poorly at auditions for years. I was very undone by the sort of artificial aspect of it. I was very intimidated by the process of it. And then and I didn't understand about myself because generally I play my best in the concert. I'll rehearse and I'll do well, but there's something extra, and I don't really get nervous for performances. I kind of get enlivened, and it's probably the only time in life I'm actually calm is when I'm performing. Um, but not so in auditions. I usually played my worst, and something in me would sort of shrivel up, and
Hmm.
and I couldn't understand that. I was like, wait, where is the performing side? And then, it occurred to me the phrase take an audition. Well, that's weird because you give a recital, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, why don't I do that? And then I was like, excerpts. Those are so weird, but excerpts don't actually exist. There's not a composer in Western civilization that ever wrote an excerpt. And contrary to our experience, Mozart did not write the four great wind audition hurdles. They're actually concertos, right?
Yeah.
So my process, my attitude towards it changed. Instead of an excerpt, I thought of everything as an aria. And I guess my biggest piece of advice is that mental shift of realizing, wait, it's music. I have to make it, right? Making music is a verb. It's something you have to do. You have to generate it. And there's something about, reading notation off a page in a big room. There's no audience, there's no one around you. You play a Beethoven symphony, there's everyone around you, there's a conductor generating tempo and movement and slowing and fast. None of that's there. It's just you alone with your instrument and a single line, which is a strange thing. So if you think of everything as an aria instead of an excerpt, and you're trying to, and you look at an audition as another opportunity to perform, because this is a performing art, and you try to make music. And also, don't try to win the job so much as use the audition as a laboratory for yourself and your music and your instrument, right? There's three things you got to keep going. And the music has to be primary, and then your instrument, the reeds, that has to be, and then your own self, your own psychology, how you perform in that environment.
Yeah.
But if you make it as a laboratory for that, and the goal is to notice as much as you can about how the music is built, and all the answers are underneath. You look in the score. You don't have to do Schenkerian analysis to realize what's happening before you. And if you can't name that as a Neapolitan chord, you can at least notice that it feels a little different than the chord before it, and it's going to the next. You can respond to the harmony. So just to try to have a more global and complete perspective about what you're doing, it also makes preparation a lot more interesting.
That's I remember much of that, hearing so much of that wonderful advice from you over the years, and it's very very eloquently put. I feel very much the same way as you know. I for some strange reason, I did have luck with auditions, and I started out,
Uh-huh.
but it's also I'm a fundamentally different player. I was a fundamentally different player every time I took an audition. I changed so much, and I tried to look back on. I mean, first of all, I tried to retroactively explain why certain things happened for me
Yeah.
when I was obviously I was so much better, and at the time I took these auditions and I won the positions, so many questions were unanswered, and I just we mentioned some of them both instrumentally and artistically. I was of course very young, and when I talk to students, I understand their their fear, and I very much agree with you that I also feel very probably most at ease with myself and calm during the performing experience because this is really natural and wonderful experience. Auditions are different because they're unnatural. I agree with you completely because none of the elements of the performance are there. Most of them are not there. The process is not there. The empty stage, the lights, the Gestapo lighting just on you,
Yes.
just the stand in front of you,
Yeah.
playing not for an audience, but the previous first rounds. If you play for the Met, all the rounds are behind the screen, and so there's no audience, and I mean all of that is very very daunting. It's very unnatural, and I will say that there are differences, and we can talk about them later, between auditions and the so-called live experience.
Mhm.
But really, as you describe it so beautifully, it is a performance. It's a beautiful process in which you make music, you create music. So there's something that just really needs to be said about auditions. When all of us are oboists, we look at the repertoire and we understand it in a completely oboistic way. For example, when we see certain, well, Le Tombeau de Couperin, for example, we'll look at the things that are most difficult and we practice them. And if we do them well, we expect to be given credit because we did the difficult things well.
Yeah.
So that is not how it works in auditions because in order to understand that you just did something difficult well, you have to know a lot about the instrument. In other words, you have to be an oboist.
Right.
And just mathematically speaking, or an English hornist, don't forget, I didn't forget about you. So, so mathematically, if you're playing an audition, you're playing for oboe, for any position in the section, you're playing for a maximum of two, maybe three people who play your instrument. So
Right.
they will be the only ones who will really be listening with the ears and eyes of the oboist.
Right.
Everyone else will not be an oboist. And that's actually very liberating again
Uh-huh.
because you're playing this music, you're creating this music for people who are musicians. Musicians don't care about instrumental things, musicians understand musical things.
Uh-huh.
And actually, you can, theoretically speaking, and in some cases it's happened that way, you can have an oboe section completely on the side of a certain candidate and everybody else completely against that candidate
Right.
or the other way around, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that the best way to approach it is it's maybe trivial to say, but it's also very true, is that you want to present the most beautiful, natural, amazing, transporting musical experience, the most interesting story that everyone on the committee will understand, and not just the people who play your instrument.
Hmm.
And I think that's just something that a lot of times we we as teachers, I mean, we struggle with this because we really have to. I mean, it's two things. One is instrumental, the other one is artistic, and it's not either or. It's there's um, where we talked about this the last time we spoke of this. So we're going to mention the difference of certain opinions about what is or isn't good between the continents, the great oceans that separate American oboe playing from European oboe playing, South American. I mean, so we're not going to delve into too much specifics and get personal with anyone. It's not necessary. But for sure, I find that the oboists out there today, who I think are really wonderful, um, the reason I think they're really wonderful is because of the musical reasons, the artistic musical reasons. And we sort of passed the discussion about tone, but the one thing I want to mention is vibrato.
Mm.
When so many things happen to oboe playing, but it's a very young instrument,
Mm.
right? Actually, I
Mhm.
was thinking about a conversation a few weeks ago. I said that the reeds have basically been the same way for 30 years, and you corrected me. 30 years. I was in college 30 years ago. Well, I guess you're right. I guess we're just that old, actually. But but it's a very young instrument. It's not been around for like 400, 500 years, unchanged like the violin. So I think we're still kind of on a journey of perfecting the instrument with every generation. And vibrato, I notice a trend in the use of vibrato, both here and in Europe. I think that people are a lot more mindful of what constitutes as wild vibrato, that's over the top, crazy, attracts too much intensity to every individual note, and the
Mm,
vibrato that contributes something and acts more like a color of the sound. And I think it's a really wonderful thing because many of us, I think, are more mindful of how vibrato works on the voice,
mhm,
the best of all possible instruments.
mhm.
And when I came to Chicago, Barenboim said something that stuck with me about vibrato. Um, Very simple. He is, of course, an amazing pianist, but he said that you can never play one beautiful note on the piano. You can play two beautiful notes or more, but you can never play one because all that note can do is die. If it's a good piano, it will die a nice death. If it's a
Yeah.
terrible piano, it'll die a terrible death. But on the oboe, just like on the voice, you can play one beautiful note because the oboe can do two things that the piano cannot. It can manipulate the intensity of the air, crescendo, diminuendo, etc., and we can use vibrato.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I think that in general, in the year 2020, all of us maybe passed the idea of camps, and I think we're just more concerned with being musicians, not just instrumentalists. And I think that these concepts, like vibrato that serves the music, the vibrato that colors the tone, are getting to be a lot more universal, not just within the North American style of oboe playing, but just I see this happening in Europe as well
Hmm.
because it just makes sense. All of us, we're so enamored with the most perfect instruments. When we're complimented with the words, your playing is vocal,
Yeah.
you really sing when you play, that's a huge compliment for us. That's what we want. So I'm glad to see that we're learning from singers, from the good singers, and that we are learning how to emulate the beautiful voice with our instruments more than before.
Hmm. Eugene, I
So
noticed the clock here. We've got, um, I think we're going to go about 90 minutes. We go a
it's
little longer,
it's
but
it's almost 1 o'clock over there, isn't it? I'm
yeah,
3 hours
right.
back. Well,
Maybe
sure.
we were going to look at some. Are there any questions that we could
Some people are
address?
commenting on the fact that you're still doing the dishes while talking to me, and hence all the background noise. Are you
I'm
doing the
not
dishes?
doing any dishes.
Well, in general, uh, people seem to be very supportive. They love you, and I love you while we're
I
at
love
it.
you
And I sure miss you.
too.
Um, so unless somebody will chime in with the immediate question, like now,
Yeah,
love seeing both of you. See, it's a love fest. It's
right.
wonderful.
That's good.
I think maybe we can leave the questions for another time,
Okay.
and and I think we should do one of these again. But
Yeah.
listen, it's during this really strange time of so much hurt for the world and for all of us. Um, with technology, at the very least, it's good that we're able to do things that maybe we were not able to do before, or maybe that we're mindful of them,
Right.
like the teaching and learning on Zoom that we discussed. And I certainly hope that this time will pass as quickly as possible, and then we will continue to find things to do
Mm.
and to find creative things to do with each other, and and even take advantage of the time that we have available to ourselves. It's a rare luxury.
It's been a pleasure, Eugene. One of my favorite things to do is think out loud with you. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, Rob, take care.
Okay.
I'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for this. Thanks everyone. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.